This is the week 15 Learn It for the Little Mermaid. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. If I can find it. Yes. Okay, so we're talking about using commas with adverbial clauses, or they call it a WWW clause on your book. This is page 32. It's week 15. When you use them and when you don't, that's the big thing. And then the other thing is the imperative mood that we'll be looking at. It's actually fairly simple. Go ahead and review all your sentence opener cards on your grammar cards. That might be a good review for you to have. But here's the rule when you have commas with adverbial clauses. There's a temptation I notice in student writing for people to always have commas with adverbial clauses, to always separate them. But they're not always separated with commas. And there's a rule for how you do that. If the adverbial clause, so the when, while, where, as, since, if, although, if that clause comes before the main clause, you need a comma after the adverbial clause, before the main clause. But if the main clause comes first, so if it were a subject opener that was followed by an adverbial clause, then there's no comma there. Okay, so the way I remember it is adverbial clauses take commas after them, but not before them. That's a quick way for me to remember that. You'll notice on page 32 there, you have some questions. The first one is, here's a sentence. During the party, while the sailors were relaxing on deck, they were ill prepared for the approaching storm. So what type of opener is this sentence? It begins with, during the party, while the sailors were relaxing on deck. Well, technically, this is a number 2 opener because it begins with during the party. That's a prepositional phrase. So your answer to the first question is it's a prepositional opener. But look at this whole, during the party, then we have while the sailors were relaxing on deck. What is that? The while they were relaxing on deck is an adverbial clause. Is the adverb clause an opener or a dress up? It's actually a little of both. Because it's not the first thing in the sentence. So because it's not the first thing in the sentence, it's acting like a dress up. But because it precedes the main clause, it's acting a little bit like a dress up. So it's a little of both in this case. Then we have number 3. How should we punctuate it? You treat it, because I don't know if you remember, previously we've said if you have more than one type of opener in a row, you put a comma after the last one, right? So that's what we're doing here. We have a prepositional phrase followed by an adverbial clause. We put a comma after that. So we're kind of treating it as an opener. No, and also follow the rule, no comma before. So follows this rule, no comma before, meaning after your prepositional phrase, you're not going to have a comma. But before the main clause, after the adverbial clause, you're going to have a comma after. So you would put the comma right there after the word deck. That's how you do it. Then we move on to the imperative mood, which is commands. If you're giving a command or advice, it doesn't have to be like an order, but commands or advice is the imperative mood. You're suggesting or requiring someone to do something. The big thing to remember there is with the imperative mood, the subject is very often understood. Most of the time a command is given, like put that down. People don't say, you put that down. You understand they're talking to you if they're looking at you and giving a command, correct? You know who they're talking to. So they give some examples in your book. Shroud yourself with sea foam. You shroud yourself with sea foam. So when you're marking, the big thing is when you're marking subjects and verbs, which we'll be doing when you correct this, you mark the verb, but for the subject, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll write in the word you. for the subject, and then I'll put an S over that. You don't have to mark the subject if you know that you is implied, but as I'm going over them with you, or if we were in class doing it, I would say, what's the subject? And you should know that the subject is you. So for my brain, just because it helps reinforce it, I actually write down the word you on the text and I mark it as the subject of my clause. That's the important thing to remember about imperative mood. And that's it for the learn it. You will probably have some commands, some imperative words that you're going to need to mark in this passage. And you will have some probably lengthy openers. You'll have cases where the comments are going to be correct and the comments are going to be wrong with your adverbial clauses. So pay close attention to those so that you can check and make sure they're right. Do your editing and then check back to see when I have the corrections video up. Good luck.